In this video, we are going to look at our next method for solving quadratic equations, and that is to solve by factoring. Now, we did our zero product property in order to set up for this method, because what we're going to do when we are solving by factoring is get it in standard form, factor the trinomial, set each factor equal to 0, and solve. So we're using our standard form, we're using our factoring, we're using our zero product property. Let's start by writing out our steps. So first we're going to get the equation in standard form. That's the ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Just basically, if you remember to get it equal to 0, then you're good. Then we're going to factor. Then we're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. That's our zero product property. And then plug in to check our answers. So let's look at some examples here. Our first example, you will notice, is already in standard form. So I am already in the ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This equals 0 is the main part. You'll notice number 2 is also already in standard form. So I'm going to solve by factoring. Step 1 is done. Step 2, I'm going to factor. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to multiply. I'm going to do the whole big long thing. I know we talked about shortcuts, but I'm going to do the whole big long factoring here. So I'm going to come in. I'm going to multiply a times c. So 1 times 2 is 2. Remember, what I want to do is multiply to 2 and add to negative 3. So I only have one option for multiplying to 2, and that's 1 times 2. When I consider my signs, I'm multiplying to a positive, so my signs need to be the same. So either both positive or both negative. Since I'm adding to a negative, they both need to be negative. So negative 1 and negative 2 is what's going to work. So completing my factoring, placing my first and my last, and then using my negative 1x and negative 2x to split my middle. So there's my x squared. Negative 1x and negative 2x is giving me the negative 3x. And then there's my 2. Pulling out the GCF, my first column has x in common. Second column, negative 1x and a positive 2. They only have 1 in common. Remember, the sign's going to follow the box that's closest. So since that's negative, that's negative. My first row, x squared and negative 1x, just have x in common. And then 2x and 2 have a 2 in common. And again, the sign follows. So since that is negative, that is negative. So it is factoring to x minus 1 times x minus 2 equals 0. So what I've done is I've rewritten this trinomial as the product of two binomials going through our factoring process. But I'm not done. I now need to solve. So now I'm going to use my zero product property. So I've got x minus 1 times x minus 2 equals 0. So I know one or the other must be 0. So either x minus 1 equals 0 or x minus 2 equals 0. Solving those equations, adding 1 to both sides, there's my first solution. Adding 2 to both sides, there's my second solution. So I have two solutions. Now really I should plug it back in to check my answers, but I'm going to save that for you to do on your own so that our video doesn't get too long here. We're going to save number 2 to do together in class. And we're going to move to number 3. So on number 3, first notice I don't have equal 0 on either side, so I am not in standard form. I need to get myself into standard form. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this thing equal to 0. So what I'm going to do, since my m squared is here, I'm going to leave these where they are. I'm going to bring this 5m to the other side. Remember, my goal is to get 0. 5m minus 5m is what gives me 0. Now, what I do to one side, I need to do to the other. And normally I say line it up with its like term, but there are no like terms on that side, so I'm just kind of putting it in the middle. Since I can't actually do any addition and subtraction because they are not like terms, I'm just going to write them in order from highest degree to the constant. Now I'm in standard form. So once I'm here, I can start factoring. So I am going to multiply first and last. So I'm going to do 1 times negative 14 is negative 14. I want to multiply to negative 14 and add to our middle number, which is negative 5. So negative 14, I've got 1 and 14, 2 and 7, 3 doesn't go, 4 doesn't go, 5 doesn't go, 6 doesn't go, 7 would start us over. Thinking about my signs, since I am multiplying to a negative, my signs will be different. Since I'm adding to a negative, my bigger one will be negative. So it's going to be 2 and negative 7, because 2 times negative 7 gives me negative 14, and 2 plus negative 7 gives me negative 5. So 2 and negative 7 is what we're going to use. Drawing the box. Placing my first and my last, and then using the two numbers I chose. So 2m, negative 7m. And then pulling out the GCF. So I'm going to look at each row, each column. So m squared and negative 7m has just an m in common. Looking at this column here, 2m and negative 14 has a 2 in common. Looking at this row here, m squared and 2m just has an m in common. And then here, 7m and 14 has a 7 in common. Because this box is negative, that's going to be negative. I can remultiply to check. M times m is m squared. M times 2 is 2m. M times negative 7 is negative 7m. And 2 times negative 7 is negative 14. So I can feel fairly confident I did that correctly. So I'm going to have m plus 2 times m minus 7 equals 0. And now I can do my zero product property. So m plus 2 equals 0. M minus 7 equals 0. Solving each of them, I get my two solutions. And we're going to save example 4 to do together in class as well.